Welcome to the Pardis channel. Today, we explain Leviticus chapter 23 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We are standing at a really crucial moment in the wilderness narrative. God is essentially hitting the pause button on the action to hand the Israelites a master calendar. We're talking about a rhythm of life that is going to define this people literally forever.
So here is our roadmap. We are going to look at the weekly Sabbath rest, then the cluster of spring-appointed times, followed by the dense grouping of fall-appointed times. Finally, we'll wrap up with some practical lessons and a quick recap. Let's dive right in. Well, right out of the gate, verses 1 and 2 ground us immediately. God speaks directly to Moses, telling him to speak to the Israelites, saying, "These are my appointed feasts, the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies." So right away, the text is telling us two things. The architect of this calendar is God himself. And the audience? It's the entire community. Now, the absolutely crucial concept here is a Hebrew word, Moedim. This translates to appointed seasons or set times. But don't just think of these as, regular holidays. Think of them as specific, mandatory appointments on your calendar to actually meet with God. The text explicitly calls them holy convocations, which means the people are required to physically gather together. These are deeply communal events, and they're woven right into the everyday fabric of their agricultural and spiritual lives. Okay, section 1, the weekly Sabbath rest. This is really the foundation of time itself in this calendar. Before God even starts mapping out the yearly events, verse 3 hits us with the most frequent appointment of all. It commands a complete cessation of regular work every seventh day. The text literally says, 6 days shall work be done, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. This sets the baseline, the core rhythm for absolutely everything else. Before mapping out the year, God maps out the week. And notice, rest isn't presented here as some kind of luxury or a nice-to-have if you finish your chores. It is a strict, sacred requirement right in your own dwellings. Moving on to section 2, we hit the spring-appointed times, going from Passover to first fruits. Look at this timeline. The spring calendar kicks off with 3 distinct but very tightly connected events, and they happen in rapid-fire succession. It all starts in the first month, right as the spring harvest season is beginning. Now, it's super common to mix these up, but it is really important to distinguish the one-night Passover event from the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread that immediately follows it. Verse 5 tells us the Lord's Passover begins exactly at twilight on the 14th day of the first month, just a single event. Then, verse 6 says that on the very next day, the 15th day, the Feast of Unleavened Bread kicks off. For 7 straight days, the Israelites must eat bread made without any yeast. On the first day and the 7th day of this week, they hold sacred assemblies and do no regular work. Next, in verses 9 through 14, we get to first fruits. The Israelites are told to offer their very first harvest to God before eating a single bite of the new grain themselves. God tells Moses that when they reap the harvest, they have to bring a sheaf of the first grain to the priest. The priest then literally waves this sheaf before the Lord on the day after the Sabbath, so it will be accepted on their behalf. But that's not all. Along with this wave offering, they've got to sacrifice a year-old male lamb without defect, plus grain and drink offerings. The text is incredibly strict here. No eating bread, no roasted grain, no fresh grain at all until this exact offering is brought to God. It's a powerful exercise in prioritizing gratitude. So how do we get to the next festival? Verses 15 and 16 explain the Feast of Weeks by giving us a very specific mathematical countdown. From the exact day they brought that sheaf of the wave offering, they are commanded to count off 7 full weeks. That is exactly 50 days. On that 50th day, they present an entirely new grain offering to the Lord. And here is where things get fascinating. Unlike the previous festival, the command here in verse 17 is to bake these 2 loaves of fine flour with yeast. Wait, yeast? Didn't we just ban that a few weeks ago? Yes, but for the Feast of Weeks, they are specifically told to bring 2 loaves baked with yeast as a wave offering of first fruits. Alongside this leavened bread, they offer a whole array of animal sacrifices. This 50th day is proclaimed a sacred assembly, a full stop where no regular work is done. Then, right in the middle of all these very precise, strict harvest rituals, verse 22 does something amazing. It beautifully pauses to mandate care for the vulnerable. It says, "When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the alien." I mean, wow, this is a profound shift in focus. While detailing complex altar sacrifices, God explicitly ties the act of worship directly to social responsibility. He's saying you literally cannot celebrate your own harvest success without providing for the people in your society who have nothing.
Let's move to section 3, the fall appointed times. We're going from trumpets to tabernacles. Jumping down to verse 23, we shift ahead to the 7th month of the year, which brings us this incredibly dense cluster of autumn festivals. Just like the spring, we have 3 major events hitting back to back: the Feast of Trumpets on the 1st day, the Day of Atonement on the 10th, and the Feast of Tabernacles on the 15th. The 7th month is absolutely the spiritual climax of the biblical calendar. Let's start with verses 23 to 25, which describe the very first day of that 7th month. It's the Feast of Trumpets. This day requires a restful assembly, and it's awakened by loud trumpet blasts. I mean, think of it as a literal, startling wake-up call to the entire community. It's an auditory alarm signaling that the most solemn time of the entire year has officially arrived. And that solemn time is the Day of Atonement, outlined in verses 26 through 32. Now, notice the stark contrast in the text here. While other festivals say, do no regular work, the Day of Atonement demands you do no work at all. None. Furthermore, the text commands the people to deny yourselves. In this context, that means a complete fast. The stakes here are incredibly high. The text warns that anyone who does not deny himself, or anyone who does any work, will be cut off or destroyed from their people. It is an absolute, uncompromising Sabbath of solemn rest. But then, following the heavy, heavy solemnity of atonement, the tone of the chapter shifts completely. Verses 33 to 36 introduce the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. This kicks off on the 15th day of the 7th month and lasts for 7 full days. The community gathers the crops of the land and throws a massive celebration. Verses 39 to 42 list the physical requirements for this week. It's incredibly tactile. They have to take choice fruit, palm fronds, and leafy branches, and they're explicitly commanded to rejoice before the Lord. But the biggest requirement: all native-born Israelites must actually pack up, move out of their comfortable permanent homes, and live in temporary booths, called Sukkot, for the entire week. It's essentially a mandatory, joyful, national camping trip right at the end of the harvest. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth are they commanded to live in temporary booths just as they're gathering all their wealth from the fields? Well, verse 43 gives us the exact reason: historical memory. God says it so all your future descendants will know that He made the Israelites live in booths when He brought them out of Egypt. By sitting in these fragile, temporary structures surrounded by their massive harvest bounty, they physically reenact their past vulnerability in the wilderness. It forces them to remember God's absolute provision and protection. Section 4, Practical Lessons and Recap. We've gone through the whole calendar, so how do we apply this text today? When we recap the plain text, a few key simple ideas emerge. First, time isn't just a random flow. It is intentionally structured by God. He built in weekly and annual interruptions. Second, physical rest is elevated to the level of a holy, non-negotiable requirement. Third, we see how the agricultural, physical lives of the people are completely tied together with their spiritual lives. Your harvest belongs to God first. And finally, history and memory must be actively preserved. So what are the practical life lessons for us? Even if we aren't ancient agrarian Israelites, we can definitely apply this wisdom today. We can build real, intentional, uncompromising rest into our non-stop weekly routines. We can always make sure to leave a portion of our modern resources, the edges of our fields, for the vulnerable. We can learn to approach our serious mistakes with absolute humility, like on atonement. And equally important, we can ensure we are taking the time to joyfully celebrate our blessings with our community. Verse 44 perfectly bookends the entire chapter. It says, "So Moses announced to the Israelites the appointed feasts of the Lord." It started in verse 1 with God giving the instructions, and it ends right here with Moses faithfully delivering this exact framework of Moedim, these divine appointments, to the nation of Israel. So as we wrap up, ask yourself, in our modern, always-on world, have we lost the art of the divine appointment? What would happen if we structured our time not just around our work schedules, but around intentional rest, generosity, and remembrance? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.